at least by December 2020, when the first clinical and the only clinical trial back then on Pfizer vaccine was made, the European Commission knew that the vaccine doesn't prevent spreading. Even though they knew it, they were promoting it as a means of preventing spread, get vaccinated, think of the others, think of your granny, think of your neighbors.
Right.
And it was an important
Same guilt trip they had here.
Yeah. Blackmailing by guilt. And this was an important part of this promotion of the product campaign. And it lasted for 2 years. On our COVID committee, it is a specialized committee on COVID crisis. We had a person from Pfizer admitting to us, no, it doesn't prevent vaccine. And it was like a atomic bomb from the European Parliament. Our colleague, Rob Ross, was lucky to ask the question and get the straight answer. And only 2 days later, there were people from the Commission, from the DG Sante, the Department for Health, who also admitted this fact. And they said, yeah, of course. We never even ordered a vaccine that prevents spread. If we wanted to, we could have, but we never have. So for 2 years, this was in autumn 2022, for 2 years, you knew that it doesn't prevent spread, even though you were lying to the people, you forced the governments of various national states to enforce your policies. This was one of the foundations for the lockdown. It was the fundamental for implementing of the COVID passport. I got vaccinated, I got the passport, I'm safe, I cannot infect anybody else. False.
Now I can eat, I can go to dinner now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A total nonsense, a complete lie. So this is simply disgusting. These people are corrupt. They knew what they were doing and they didn't care. They just used it as a tool to sell as much vaccines as possible and to force as many people, to blackmail as many people as possible to get this product. As we know, the product is experimental. It was not tested properly. And now we have in Europe enormous amount of side effects. So we have more side effects in 1 or 2 years than all the other vaccines combined in 30 years. Yet again, this week we are here to say no to discrimination and no to segregation. We are here to defend fundamental and human rights. I will say it again. Digital green certificate is illogical, it's non-scientific, and it is useless for solving this crisis. On the contrary, it gives people carrying it a false sense of security that they cannot be infected themselves or infect others. More and more scientific data and everyday experience confirms that. DGC is not here about our health. It is about politics, it is about rights. All around Europe, policies have been installed that have stolen people's normal life. Governments are basically blackmailing the citizens more and more. Croatian government openly admits that DGCs are just additional pressure upon those who do not want to take the vaccine for whatever reason. You cannot get your normal life unless you get the DGC. You cannot have your freedoms unless you get the DGC. On the other hand, healthy people are being deprived of their freedoms and constitutional rights. They are not going to stop, my friends. They must be stopped. This is not going to stop by itself. It will spread. It will come to your door. It will blackmail your life, every piece of your life. This is why we continuously say no.
I should have done this as I was meeting Ivan. I forgot to even announce how to pronounce your name. So why don't you just let us know? That was a clip of a Croatian member of parliament who's with me in studio now. We're honored to have them here. Ivan, is it Vilibor Sincic?
Sinčić.
Sinčić.
Yeah.
Okay, Sinčić. All right, I got that one right. I should have known that from all the Croatians that I watch on the World Cup, how to pronounce your names. Well, I'm glad that you're here. And when your name was brought up to me, I'd seen some of the clips of you discussing COVID and some other issues. And so when the crew brought my name or your name to me, I was excited that you were going to be in studio with us as well. But let's just get right into the COVID issue, because I think with the language barrier, the culture barrier, the media barrier that we have between not just U.S. and Croatia, but many other countries, we don't know exactly how other countries responded, how their citizens responded, what type of tyranny they had to endure. So what was that like going through that in COVID? Did people go into lockdown and celebrate it? Did they push back? What was that like in Croatia?
Well, in Croatia, people don't trust their government. So if the government said, you know, it's Monday today, at least half of the population won't believe that. They will start asking questions, they will resist, there will be civil disobedience. So when the government, let's just explain the fact in the start. Croatian government is a puppet government. Croatian prime minister was basically appointed by the Brussels. He was a member of the European Parliament, and then he resigned that place.
So that's like Germany influencing Croatia's government?
The Brussels establishment.
Or Belgium, whoever's running the EU.
It is a supranational Brussels establishment. You have, like, at least Trump said it, like the Washington swamp. We have the Brussels swamp. So he was trained there, and then he was sent to Croatia to become a prime minister. Croatia is not the only example of that. They do it all around Europe. Brussels is like an incubator of political puppets. And once they finish their training, they're sent to their national country. So Mr. Plenković, our prime minister, was basically implementing Brussels policies. So that means lockdowns, masks, digital COVID certificates, you know, the digital passports, and anything else they asked for him. And the people resisted all the time. We had many major protests. We had very good scientists that debunked all the lies, all the nonsense. The government policies were undemocratic, they were unscientific, and now we know we were right.
Well, and they weren't even coming from Croatia. They were coming from Brussels. They were coming from outside of your own borders.
Yes, of course. We were always looking at a model of Germany, of Austria, since the Croatian politicians often have, the establishment ones often have this complex of lesser value. Oh, what are we supposed to do? Well, let's see what the Germans do, let's see what the Austrians do, let's see what the French do. And the Germany and Austria had very strict measures, like lockdown for years and years, and very strict implementation of digital COVID certificate. But because of the resistance of the people, because of our society that functions differently, because Croatia, some 30 years ago, before the fall of the Berlin Wall, was a part, we had like this one-party system. It was not communism, it was like non-aligned movement, but it was still a totalitarian society. One party control everything, the society, the economy, the media. So we remember how was it back then. And when they try to implement such policies, we automatically recognize, they're gonna go back to these totalitarian times. And all the Eastern Europe was far better off in resisting the COVID measures and the COVID policies that were coming from Brussels. And while the Western Europe was not.
Now, is it kind of like the World Economic Forum? We have a lot of World Economic Forum influence on our policies here in the United States. Is it kind of the same dynamic with Brussels or with the EU and Croatia?
Absolutely. The policies that are implemented in Croatia, either agricultural policy or demographic policy, any other, migrations, any other, they are not made in Croatia. They are only signed, presented, and promoted in Croatia by the Prime Minister and by the government. They are made in Brussels. There are like 30,000 bureaucrats. They make the policies. And of course, they come from Davos. This is this Brussels establishment, the Brussels swamp, that is forcing these globalist policies on all the member states. So in European Union, you basically have either the globalist governments, such as Macron in France, or you have national sovereignist governments, like in Poland and Hungary, or you have these puppet governments, like in Croatia. These are the three main models that exist in Europe.
Well, and you were explaining how Croatia is very diverse. They have about 7 political parties, is what you were saying?
No, the European Parliament has 7 major political groups.
Okay. But you are not affiliated.
No, I'm not
You're what
affiliated.
we would call an independent.
Yeah, you can call it like that.
So are independents having success politically right now in Croatia? Is that because you've stood up against the COVID tyranny? People wanted to make sure you were representing them?
Yes, in Europe, now you can see a tidal wave of sovereignist parties. You can see it in Sweden, the recent elections. You can see it in Italy. There are many other countries where the sovereignist options are gaining popularity. And the Brussels establishment is mad. They're crazy. They don't know what to do. They cannot manage the union anymore. Hungarians are even considering like leaving the union, following the British. Who knows what will happen? The European Union is very unstable at this moment, politically disunited, and we have a very dynamic autumn in a few months.
And I feel that this is something that what we call the globalists are facing everywhere. I mean, they're having problems right now, not just with the EU, but here in America, anytime we see somebody from the World Economic Forum, it's just immediate, like, ugh, we don't even want anything to do with that. One example might be Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running for president right now. I like everything he's saying. I like the direction he's moving the ball and the Overton window, but people, they just see, oh, he was once with them or he was once with Soros. Never, not going to happen. He's the worst. Is it similar? Like, oh, if you see somebody coming out of Brussels or you see somebody tight with the EU, people in Croatia just nope, zero tolerance?
Yes, many people in Croatia can't stand the World Economic Forum. Who the hell are they? Who voted for these people? Did they ever got one vote?
No.
No, they never got
Not a single one, actually.
So our democracy is in danger. It is endangered by the corrupt establishment. It is endangered by this Brussels swamp, which is a supranational entity, also nobody elected. And it is endangered by the World Economic Forum, also by huge corporations such as BlackRock and Vanguard. They're everywhere. And they can buy scientists, journalists, politicians. It's a very dangerous concept.
Well, let's talk about that when we come back from the break, and that's a perfect segue into Ukraine, where I know you have expressed some opinions about that as well, and how it's the same thing as, oh, look, now Ukraine has been devastated, all this property, infrastructure devastated, and then it's the same people. It's BlackRock, it's Vanguard, it's the central banks that come in, and they can buy this property up for pennies on the dollar, and then develop it however they see fit. A lot of people think this might be going on, something similar in Maui as well today. So Ivan is with the Sinčić.
Yep.
I got it. Sinčić. Don't go anywhere, folks. It's an honor to have him here in America with us. We will be right back. Well, wait, hold on. One of the issues, because I told Ivan we'd move on to Ukraine, but he said, wait a second, we got to talk about the vaccine. This is a big one. I said, well, of course. And you've been very outspoken about that. But you were mentioning how you guys know, and you have the documents. What did the EU know about the vaccine before they were promoting it?
At least by December 2020, and the first clinical and the only clinical trial back then on Pfizer vaccine was made, the European Commission knew that the vaccine doesn't prevent spreading. Even though they knew it, they were promoting it as a means of preventing spread, you know, get vaccinated, think of the others, think of your granny, think of your neighbors.
Right.
And it was an important
Same guilt
part.
trip they had here.
Yeah. Blackmailing by guilt. And this was an important part of this promotion of the product campaign. And it lasted for 2 years. On our COVID committee, it is a specialized committee on COVID crisis. We had a person from Pfizer admitting to us, no, it doesn't prevent vaccine. And it was like a atomic bomb from the European Parliament. Our colleague Rob Ross was lucky to ask the question and get the straight answer. And only 2 days later, there were people from the Commission, from the DG Sante, the Department for Health, who also admitted this fact. And they said, yeah, of course. We never even ordered a vaccine that prevents spread. If we wanted to, we could have, but we never have. So for 2 years, this was in autumn 2022, for 2 years, you knew that it doesn't prevent spread, even though you were lying to the people, you forced the governments of various national states to enforce your policies. This was one of the foundations for the lockdown. It was the fundamental for implementing of the COVID passport. You know, I got vaccinated, I got the passport, I'm safe, I cannot infect anybody else. False.
Now I can eat, I can go to dinner now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A total nonsense, a complete lie. So this is simply disgusting. These people are corrupt. They knew what they were doing and they didn't care. They just used it as a tool to sell as much vaccines as possible, and to force as many people, to blackmail as many people as possible to get this product. As we know, the product is experimental. It was not tested properly, and now we have in Europe enormous amount of side effects. So we have more side effects in 1 or 2 years than all the other vaccines combined in 30 years. And
wow.
Yeah.
So this obviously upsets you, as it should anybody. But what about your fellow members of parliament? Are they upset? Do you guys talk about this? Do they raise hell when they gather?
We founded MEP's Alliance for Liberty. MEP is a member of European Parliament. And we were working very hard in order to discover as many facts as possible, in order to inform the people, warn the people about the facts that the mainstream media was hiding, that establishment politicians were hiding. And I'm very proud of this part of our work. With time, more and more members of the parliament have recognized what's happening, especially on the conservative side, the sovereignist side, or the right side of the parliament. And this is now also taking effect in the popularity of the parties along the European continent, in the European Union. It is simply incredible that such level of corruption can be seen. This is only one part. The second part is that the European Commission, von der Leyen, the president of the Commission personally, arranged purchase of 5 billion vaccines. So European Union has 450 million people. It's like 11 vaccines for every European, child or adult. And they paid it 70 billion euros. And now nobody wants the vaccines.
Yeah, they're going out. They're expiring.
Yeah, they're expiring. They have to be burnt. This has extra costs. And now they were even forcing the member states, buy more, buy more. You know, we have the contracts. What do we do? Buy more. It's ridiculous. It's disgusting. And it's charlatanism. These people are either incompetent or corrupt. I think they're both. They're bad actors.
Yeah. And essentially what we have here in our Congress is we've got Ron Johnson, who's really kind of led the way pushing back against the vaccines. He had a second opinion summit where he had a bunch of doctors and scientists saying, hey, here's the truth about these vaccines. You were lied to. He's also gone as far now, I would say this is the farthest anyone in our Congress has gone, as he said the whole thing was planned by a global elite. And he cited Event 201, which was somehow magically the exact same thing, a drill. So you guys are aware of this as well. We have Rand Paul, who's calling out Anthony Fauci for some of the crimes against humanity we view he has engaged in. Where is that at in Croatia? Is there a big push? Is it kind of just an isolated group of people? Are the voters behind you?
Well, we can only solve it on a European level, perhaps even on a global level. This is why it is very important for all the people in Europe, all the good people, all the good scientists, the journalists, the politicians, the activists, everything in Europe and North America to get connected, to make a strong political and social axis to overthrow these corrupt, also politicians, but also corrupt scientists. Like you have Fauci here. He's notorious also in Europe. This is the best and the fastest way to get rid of this corruption. Unfortunately, many scientists were on a paying list of who knows who, and this is why they were doing this. We call it in Croatia pandemic marketing. You know, you are saying something about the measures or the products that is not true, or you are exaggerating in order to achieve some of your own goals.
And let's not forget about the media's role in this, paid for by Big Pharma, showing you the death numbers, the red alerts, all this stuff. But you had just mentioned, I mean, let me just ask you like this. Would you attend a global summit? Would you attend a global summit with other European leaders, American leaders, African leaders, I mean, just from all over the world to push back against this, to push back on what happened to all of us? Would you attend that? Would you promote that?
Absolutely. We need to make at least the Western or even global platform against this corrupt establishment, corrupt political establishment, scientific establishment, corporate establishment, anything. And we need to do it as soon as possible. And I believe we have already won. It's only a matter of time because the policies they are pushing, it's nonsense. It's not going to work. It's not working. People are not trusting them.
You called it a digital cage.
Yeah, they are building a digital cage. With every passing year in the European Parliament, we have directives, resolutions, reports. They are trying to regulate cryptocurrencies. Now there is this digital currency. There is also the issue of biometric surveillance and 15-minute cities. It is all a part of the same agenda. And while doing this, while promoting and implementing these policies, they're ignoring the will of the people, and they're behaving very undemocratic.
Are they going after the farmers in Croatia like they have in other parts of Europe?
Slowly. Most of our agriculture was destroyed during the last 30 years, so we are like a special case. Croatia is a smaller member of the Union. We only make like 1% of the population. The policies are made for the rich countries in the West, like the Germany and the Netherlands and the France, which have enormous agriculture. The recent case was nature restoration law, and it has a good sounding name, but behind it, there is a possibility of taking your land.
That's what they always do. We're up against a break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, you were getting into how they say something that sounds positive, but then behind that is a dark force. The nature restoration law, you were explaining that a little bit to me in the break, and you actually had the deciding vote when this was up. But talk about the tactic they use to make it sound like, hey, this is a good thing, but then when you find out what's really going on, it's probably not so good.
Yes, of course. Nature restoration law sounds very beautiful. Of course, nobody is against nature. We cannot live without nature. But the way they do it, the idea of this law is basically to turn the clock of time backwards, 30, 50, 70 years. So there is also a mechanism to compensate the owner of the land. So if you have a piece of land where there is, for example, food being produced and people are living, the government decides, oh yes, we want to restore this land and make it swamp again. And in order to do it, we will pay you out, and then we will make a special program to put the swamp back there. What is the most dangerous part of the European legislation? They give you a piece of paper that is only half written. The upper half is written, you can read it, and then you have to vote on it. And after you vote, then they write the second half, the details, and the devil is in the details. First, the national governments of the member states, they make their plans, how they're going to implement this, what is an endangered area, what species should be put back, all the details. And then the Commission approves it. And there are some additional pieces of legislation that explain details from the Commission. So once you get it as a member of the Parliament, it's only half of the policy. And the intention of this was very bad. It is potentially a very dangerous piece of legislation. It was rejected by 3 committees. My committee is ENVI committee, the Committee for the Environment, Food Safety, and in there I had luck to be the deciding vote. It was 44 for and 44 against. But in the plenary, a few weeks later, it was a 10 difference vote. Like half the parliament voted for and half voted against. And now we will see how this policy will be implemented.
So what they do here is they drop a stack, 2,000 pieces of legislation or 2,000 pages of legislation on your desk, and then they tell you you're voting on this in an hour. And then, of course, members of Congress go vote on something they never read. Yeah. I mean, your case might be even worse. You can't even read it if you want to. Yeah,
because it's not written yet. They're going to write it after we vote on it. The example you mentioned, it's not democracy. This is a mockery of democracy.
I can't even believe that that's legal. And then they do the same thing, though, and they're doing this in other parts of Europe, they'll offer to buy the land, right? So you get this, look at this big check. Maybe it's good for you, your family, but they don't understand you're selling out your country in a way when you do that.
Yes, of course. There are greedy corporations that don't care about national sovereignty. And the puppet governments simply allow them to take over control of anything. The recent case of Croatia is the case of Croatian coast. So the Croatian coast and the sea is public good. But now they changed the law, and now we will give it to the investors. You want to buy the beach? Okay, we will allow you to do that. It's very bad and very dangerous.
And I noticed as I'm looking at the video of them voting, it's crazy because we see the same stuff from the same political ideologies. They wear the T-shirt that says "Restore Nature," right? Oh well, we all love restoring nature, sure. But that's not what this really is about. This is about really the T-shirt should say, "Let government and big corporations own all the land." That's what the T-shirt should say.
Exactly. We can restore restoration with our national parliament, the Parliament of Germany, the Bundestag, the Croatian Parliament, Swedish Parliament. We don't need European legislation to save the forest or coastal environment zone, anything. It's simply pointless to give even more power to the Commission. In European Union, there's a saying, whatever the question is, the answer is always more Europe, more common policies, more power to the Brussels. And the peoples of Europe are tired of that.
Is that typical, by the way? Put that image back on the screen with them in the T-shirts. I'm guessing that's all the kind of leftist, and they're wearing the T-shirts, and then anybody else that didn't vote that way is wearing the suit and tie. She's got a little chicken haircut there, too. Is that kind of a normal... Did they have a look in Croatia? They have a look here.
Well, in Croatia, we are not that far off. Things are a little bit different. But the Commission is basically paying various NGOs that then put pressure on the members of the parliament. Since I was the deciding vote, I was the last one to take a stand because I had other things to do. And during the last week before the voting, like everybody called me. NGOs were knocking, you should vote this, this is why you should vote that.
Oh, the pressure came in.
Pressure was enormous. But they couldn't break me, they couldn't convince me. I simply told them, no, this law is bad for Croatia. Perhaps it's good for some other country, but they have their own representative. That's democracy. So I voted against it.
That's an amazing story. And obviously, you're not the only person they're calling.
No.
They're calling anybody with a vote.
Yeah, yes, they do. They put pressure on whoever they think could benefit them.
Well, it's very amazing because, again, it's a similar stuff to what we have going on here. And it sounds like this system of political corruption, I wouldn't say it's perfected because it hasn't been completely successful as there is resistance. But, you were actually saying that, too, to kind of get back to the beginning here, how resistance has been victory. Resistance has been the victory for Croatia.
Yes, of course. As I mentioned during the COVID crisis, the government of Croatia wanted to implement strict policies on the Croatian people. Our role model was Germany and Austria, which had these lockdowns that lasted for years, that were very strict with masks and with COVID passports, everything, the worst possible totalitarianism. But the people resisted on every way. And in the end, we had very mild measures. I think Sweden was the best in Europe, and Croatia was just after that. So we only had one small lockdown, no more lockdowns. It was amazing to see my people united in such a great number against this corrupt government, puppet government that is implementing Brussels policies.
Well, and you were, I looked at your bio, it looked like you were involved even before the pandemic. You didn't come around after the pandemic, correct?
No, we were there from the start.
So that's great, though, that it sounded like you kind of already had some resistance in there, and the people didn't have to go vote new leadership in because there was none.
Corona crisis started in Croatia in February 2020, and in April 2020, I understood something's wrong here. Why are they ignoring the scientists? Yes, they have their court scientists, a minister of health and some people at some institute, but they're dependent on the government. So they would say anything, and they were saying nonsense. On the other hand, you had the top science, the top world science, the Nobel Prize winners, the top epidemics, many of which are in America and everything. And they were saying the different thing. Why are you censoring these people? How have we come to a situation that a fact checker with high school can correct a Nobel Prize winner in his field? Is this science? No, this is not science. Is this democracy? It's not democracy. Whenever they try to censor something, there's something wrong here. So little by little, we organized resistance in Croatia and Europe. Everybody did his part. I'm very proud of all my people, my colleagues, and we are going to fight till the end, till the final victory. Now it's time for accountability. We want to see people like Fauci held accountable. We want to see Croatian Minister of Health held accountable. We want to see people from EMA, European Medical Agency. This is like FDA in America, from ECDC, European Disease Control Center. This is like CDC in America. And all the other people who were misguiding the entire countries, who were misguiding all the member states.
Let's talk about what that might look like and if there's momentum for that in the last segment with my guest on the other side of this break. Well, this is amazing here. It's the last segment with my guest, Ivan Sinčić. And he was saying, yeah, well, as soon as we turned off the TV, we started to learn more and understand more. And I guess that's because your media, maybe you have less independent media sources in Croatia. So you were saying literally just the device, the programming is the problem, but just turning off the device, it shuts down that trance that you're in.
Yeah, that's true. Once you start looking at the TV, you start thinking, your brain works differently, and this is one of the first steps in forming your own opinion. I don't know whether any scientific research was done on this issue, but it seems to me that the device has some kind of hypnotic influence on the subconscious.
No, it does. That's what I was saying. I was telling you in the break that in the 30s, the TV was already invented. They didn't release it until they had the flicker patterns down until it was in a trance, and then they wanted to release it. They were testing it on monkeys and everything, and then they released it during the war because everybody wanted to go buy a TV, see the war, see the sights, see the sounds, see the news. But they had already been working on it 5-10 years, mastering the flicker rate so that you would be in a trance. And I mean, we all see it. Look, I like TV. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm not somebody. I'd stare at TV all day. I probably got a problem. But it's like, I know it's a weapon. You know, that's the thing. I know it's a weapon. But we see the images. The kids just sit down in front of the TV, and it's just like their minds are gone.
Like in theta state or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about the holding our leaders accountable. How much momentum is there right now, whether it's in Croatia or in Europe? I mean, there's some pretty good momentum here. It's not overwhelming, but it's significant. There is a significant momentum here to hold our leaders accountable. How much momentum is there in Europe right now, whether it's Fauci or whether it's your own local health advisors that gave you bad advice?
There is a lot of momentum on the political scene in Europe. We have these two black sheeps in Europe, which are the government of Hungary and the government of Poland. And for many years, they have opposed the centralization, the bureaucracy, the political violence from Brussels. I personally don't care who is in power in Poland. This is up to the Polish people. I believe in democracy, and the Polish people have to elect whoever they want. Now we see like a tidal wave of sovereignists in Europe. We can see it in Sweden, which has shifted to a conservative government. We can see it in Italy. We see it now in Germany, where the EFD has got a lot of support, like over 20% by the recent polls. We can also see it in Romania. I was in Romania some weeks ago. Very good people who love their country, who respect everybody else, and who are simply tired of this violence that's coming from Brussels, these globalist policies their current government is conducting. And this is also happening in many other places.
So speaking of political corruption, I got to ask you this before we let you go here. Our last president, Donald J. Trump, is under extreme political persecution. It looks like they're about to probably arrest him, maybe even this week, put him in jail. I mean, we'll see how far they want to go with this latest flub that they made where they press charges before they even finish the process. This would be like, I guess I'll use a soccer. Do they call it soccer or football in Croatia?
We call it nogomet, which means football.
Nogomet?
Yeah.
So this would be like if they just decided at 70 minutes, they're going to stop the game. It's like, you know what? We like this score. We're just going to stop the game now. And if the fans are saying, wait a second, this is a 90-minute game. We played 90 minutes. This is a rigged game. They said, nope, we're just going to do 70 minutes. We like this score. That's basically what they did in this latest indictment. I won't get into the legalese of it. What do the people of Europe or Croatia, do they see this as political corruption? Do they think Trump is the bad guy? What do the European people see when they see Trump's name in the news all the time?
Well, in 2014, I was running as a very young candidate for the president of Croatia. It's not such a powerful position.
You were running for president?
Yeah.
By the way, he's a young guy. He's a year younger than me.
So people called me from some media, probably even American media, and they asked me, are you following the American elections? Who do you support in the American elections? I said, I don't like anybody. There was no Trump back then. And
that's probably good instincts, not to like anybody.
Yeah, because
maybe Ron Paul's probably the only one.
I had an impression. I cannot judge America, but this is my impression for the European perspective, that this swamp in Washington, probably run by the pharmaceutical companies and the military-industrial complex, is dictating many of the policies. It has probably influenced or bought some of the people in Congress. So they are making these laws that are not helping the common American man. For example, their priority now is Ukraine. They're sending billions to Ukraine, but not to Baltimore or Detroit or any other place. So I couldn't support anybody. And then Trump appeared. Trump was a breeze of fresh air because he announced this, the destruction of this swamp in Washington. And I think this is what needs to be done in America. This is what needs to be done in Europe. The power needs to be given back to the people. And how is this supposed to be done? You need, this model, weak people make bad times and bad times make strong people. It's a very good, historically accurate model. We need to have strong people in right places, in the prosecution, the president, the Congress, everywhere, European Parliament. And what does it mean to be a strong man, strong woman? It means that you cannot be bought. You have your beliefs, you have your word that you gave to your voters. For me, that's sacred. And you have to simply follow the will of the people and never put your own interest in front of the interest of your voters. And once we have enough people like that in the necessary places, we are going to finish this and get back the good times again.
So, speaking of Ukraine, what kind of support is there in Croatia? Do they like all the EU support, even though it's been mostly just posturing? It's mostly been out of America. But do they like that support, or do they think it's just more military-industrial complex activity?
Well, the Ukrainian people and the Russian people are both Slavic people. They are both close to us. And we are very sad that this war is happening. I have spoken about this many times before. During the last 30 years, NATO was expanded to the east. And the Russians were saying for like 20 years, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And finally, they invaded Ukraine. It was inevitable. The problem is that the Western establishment, they don't care about Ukrainian people. Of course, they don't care about Russian people. They just want to overthrow the Russian government and probably install some other puppet government, probably cut Russia to pieces, which is insane. It's a country with 6,000 nuclear missiles.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. It's
not without a war that's going to kill tens of millions, or potentially hundreds of millions.
It's complete madness. I can't find any logic in that. And what we see now in the battlefield it's not really a war; it's a massacre.
Yeah.
So many Ukrainian soldiers and civilians have been killed, but also Russian. It's going nowhere. European Union is going into a geopolitical defeat, and the establishment around von der Leyen is completely blind. They live in a cage of illusions, fantasy. It's so sad to see. I'm sad to be one of the voices of reason who says we need peace, we need it as soon as possible. There is no solution on the battlefield, and stop this madness. It's going nowhere.
Well, I feel like as long as that money is still coming in droves, there's always going to be a motive to keep the war going. And I feel like from the Kiev regime standpoint, that seems to be their motive. They're not winning any victories. They're devastating their people.
No, their counteroffensive that was announced as a spring counteroffensive finally happened, but in the Vilnius NATO summit, it didn't bring any results. And it's clear now that there is no military solution, that they cannot take back the lands that Russia took, and that it can only be solved with ceasefire and with negotiations. The reason should take over, not the propaganda. And the military-industrial complex that is powerful in Washington also influences European politics. Europe is not united on this. There are countries that are only sending humanitarian aid. There are countries that are sending everything they have, like all the weapons. So there is no unity. There is not a common stand on the situation in Ukraine. This is also increasing this conflict within the member state of the European Union.
Well, and what's amazing too, it's not just that there's no consistent support from the EU. There's no support here. I mean, really, you ask the average American, 8 out of 10 of them is going to say, I don't want anything to do with that war. But Washington, D.C. doesn't care. The White House doesn't care. They just keep going down this road. Well, I'm so glad that you came and spent time with us today, and I hope you and your family enjoy the rest of your time in the States. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we'll be right back. I got more news to come. Don't go anywhere.
I've been shadow banned. I've been called a liar. I've been silenced on virtually every platform created by man. My life has been threatened repeatedly. They've tried to destroy me, but I've survived. And that's why I'm joining Mug Club.
The replatforming begins now. Join Mug Club and get 1 month free with promo code ALEX at jonescrowder.com.